The U.S. military disables another commercial ship trying to violate its blockade on ports in Iran. This comes as we await President Trump's decision whether to launch what could be the largest military assault the war has seen so far. Chief International Correspondent Steve Harrigan is live in Tel Aviv, Israel, with the latest. Hello, Steve.
Mike, quiet overnight, the first quiet we've seen really in just about 2 weeks' time. For 13 straight nights, U.S. forces targeted military targets inside of Iran last night. That simply didn't happen. There's been a lot of talk about a potential massive attack on Iran from the U.S. President Trump making it clear the U.S. still at this point is keeping all options open. Here's the president.
Should we expect to see major strikes?
Look, we're talking to them right now. I think they're getting more and more serious as the days go by, for maybe the obvious reason. But we are talking to them right now. Look, there are two ways. I consider that the smarter way, but the other is probably the easier way, doing what we're doing. And we can take that to a much higher level if we want to. You know, we're prepared to do that, as you know. We're locked and loaded. We're locked and loaded and ready to go.
Still military action taking place on the water in the Gulf of Oman. As you know, the U.S. has a naval blockade around Iran's key ports. A merchant ship tried to break that naval blockade. It was warned 4 times before U.S. forces fired and disabled that ship. Mike, back to you.
Steve Harrigan live in Tel Aviv. Steve, many thanks. For more, let's bring in former Defense Secretary under President Trump's first term, Mark Esper. Mr. Secretary, welcome.
Good to be with you, Mike.
So after about 2 weeks of really nonstop military action against military targets in Iran, last night was the first quiet night. President Trump was asked about an exit strategy.
We just keep going just the way we are, and we can even make it a heavier dose, and it's knocking out everything they have. Or there's a smarter strategy, and that's you make a deal. And they want to make a deal. I just don't think they're ready yet. Or we can negotiate with them, which we're also doing right now. I mean, as we speak, we're talking to them.
Secretary Esper, where are we in this conflict?
Well, Mike, it feels like that we're on the cusp of the president expanding the attacks against Iran. This may be a 24 or 48-hour respite while U.S. forces reposition, prepare, reload, et cetera, for something much bigger that looks like the beginning of the war. And at the same time, of course, he's maintained the blockade. I'd like to see him, frankly, expand it to every type of entry and exit point around the country, whether it's air, sea, or ground. At the same time, though, he's keeping the door open for diplomacy. So in my mind, this is his attempt to get them back to the negotiating table in a serious way. And so I think it needs to be encouraged, at least, to see if we can do that.
Satellite imagery suggests the Iranian regime is quickly rebuilding its nuclear sites that the U.S. targeted about a year ago. How alarming is that to you?
Well, it's not surprising that they'd be trying to do that. And of course, they're trying to rebuild much of their conventional military as well, particularly the ballistic missiles, their cruise missiles, their drones, and they've been effective at doing that. So, look, I think they're going to continue to pursue the means by which they want to gain leverage. They want to rebuild capabilities, which is why I'm a big believer in the blockade in terms of cutting off all sources of revenue. Because if they don't have revenue, Mike, then they can't rebuild their military. They can't pursue their nuclear ambitions. They can't support their proxies in Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthis, for that matter. So there's a whole lot they can't do. So I again like to see us strangle them economically as much as we can.
We know the president was giving an opportunity for negotiations with the regime. To you, is it clear who's actually running Iran?
Well, it's to me, it's clear that the military is in charge. They have divisions, obviously, in their government. That's always been the case, by the way, between the hardliners and the so-called not-so-hardliners. Typically, it's represented now between the IRGC and President Pezeshkian, who doesn't have a foreign policy role. So that doesn't surprise me. But nonetheless, they're still a revolutionary government. They are still committed to the ideals of a revolutionary Iran. And my view is they're going to continue this fight as long as possible, and they're not going to set aside their nuclear ambitions. So we're going to need a way forward, a negotiated agreement going forward that will make sure that we eventually get inspectors back on the ground so that we're there all the time to keep an eye on them.
Then there's the headlines this week on a civilian nuclear deal with Saudi Arabia. I want to play a clip from the president, and I'll get your analysis.
In order to do it, they have to be a member of the Abraham Accords, which have been very successful. But it's time now that they do it. It's a two-way street, and we think it's very important for the future of the Middle East. The Abraham Accords have been incredibly successful for the countries, as you know, for the countries in them. At some point, they'll join, and they'll do their civil. That's who I call it, civil nuclear, but that's what it is. No enrichment.
What would it mean across the Middle East if the Saudis were to join the Abraham Accords?
Well, look, Mike, I think first and foremost, we have to recognize that Saudi Arabia is a country in good standing with the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. They've been members since the late 1960s and have had the safeguards agreement in place for a couple decades or so. So, look, they have a right under the international treaty to do so. And this is something they pursued for many years. It's something that was enabled, pursued by the United States for a few administrations as well. So this is not new. But it's good to see it going forward. My concern is that if it's not us, then they will pursue this with China and Russia, who I have far less trust in. And we certainly don't want either of those two countries gaining more of a foothold in the Middle East. Now, of concern to me, of course, is if we're going to pursue this, then we need to make sure that they sign up to what's called the additional protocol. Most nuclear non-proliferation treaty countries, to include the United States, have signed on to an additional protocol, which means it's a safer, more credible, allows for more inspections type of regime. So I think we need to press the Saudis to do that before we actually turn over the technology and begin that process. And that should not be a difficult decision for them, frankly.
Former Defense Secretary Mark Esper, grateful for your analysis today, sir. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mike.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.